When I was a little kid, I developed this mental image in my mind of people and the world being like a red hot stove, in that when you reached out to connect with them, they burnt you like a red hot stove. And I quickly went from this little boy who was quite boisterous and extroverted, animated and theatrical, to this little boy who became very shy, insular, insecure, and came to associate being noticed and seen with the potential threat of humiliation. And I developed a deep fear of being humiliated. And this little boy came to associate the idea of being unseen and invisible with safety and security. So by the time I hit high school and I was introduced to a myriad of different drugs, pretty much all of which I experimented with, the one that I gravitated to the most and ended up building an addiction to was marijuana, because marijuana numbed me. It quieted me down, it de-animated me, and it gave me a greater sense of invisibility. Some people become addicted to drugs because they want to feel more alive and connected, whereas I was the opposite. Because I had a deep-seated fear of life and of people, and this fear of being humiliated, I wanted something that helped me retreat from life and retreat into myself, and marijuana really did that. So by the time I was 19, 20, as I've discussed in a previous video, I had got to the point where I couldn't function without marijuana. I would literally wake up in the morning, pivot to the side of my bed, pack a cone, then I would light up the first of 50 to 60 cigarettes for the day, and then I would continue to smoke weed all day and all night as soon as I started coming down from the effects of it, which would last about 90 minutes. So after about 90 minutes or so, I would start to feel more sensitive to my environment, more animated, and so I would line up again, and that would numb me again, and I would have that sense of security and safety, in that I felt more invisible because I was less animated and I was number, so there was less chance of being noticed and being seen, which equaled, in my mind, less chance of being humiliated. Now, to people, on the outside, I'm sure I appeared very dysfunctional, and I had a friend who used to refer to me as no future and sometimes potential suicide victim. And I appeared to many people to be very limited in my ability to show up in the world, and indeed I was. But having made that association with being unseen and unnoticed with security, and being seen and noticed with the threat of humiliation or some kind of sense of danger, a fear of, as I had been growing up, beaten up emotionally, mentally, sometimes physically, the idea of the more animated I was, the greater the risk of that, versus the number I was, which marijuana made me feel, the safer I was. In that sense, for me, on the inner, I was actually making a decision that I felt was empowering me, in the sense that it lessened my fear of being humiliated. And sometimes when we observe other people and their behavior, it's easy to think of them as dysfunctional, or to assume that we know more about what they should be doing or what they could be doing based upon our own internal makeup, because we see that behavior as being dysfunctional and disempowering based upon how we see the world and how we experience ourselves. But for that person, it could very much be their way of empowering themselves. I personally believe that everybody's actions are in some way their attempt to empower themselves. Even if you see a homeless person on the street who just sits down with their little bucket and asks for money, there's no way of knowing what kind of internal dialogue that person is experiencing. You may think, why don't they just get a job, or why don't they just apply for housing? But perhaps their inner dialogue is something around being useless and unworthy. Who would employ me? If you go to that interview, you'll just make a fool of yourself. Nobody's interested in what you have to offer or what you have to say. And perhaps for some of those people, the idea is just to not bother. And by not bothering and just putting out their little bucket, rather than that being a disempowering act for them, perhaps it's more about avoiding the fear of being humiliated in the area of job interviews or applying for housing, or perhaps there's just a complete lack of confidence in being able to look after oneself. And of course, there is a direct link between proving to ourselves that we can look after ourselves and self-esteem. And if you haven't proven to yourself that you're capable of looking after yourself, and you've never had the experience of that, and you've grown up feeling that you're not able to do that, you're going to have very low self-esteem, very low self-worth. And that can manifest in all kinds of behaviors and ideas about oneself that, again, on the outside may look dysfunctional to me, to you, to other people, but for that person, it's actually an act of self-empowerment. Hi, I'm Will Kelly. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you found it helpful, please let me know by smashing that like button, leaving a comment, and subscribing to my channel. And if you can think of anyone this video may help, then please feel free to share it with them. And until next time, my beautiful friend, bye for now.